picture a standard suburban weekend in Portland. Just a totally normal Saturday.
Right. Okay, I'm picturing it.
So father is standing in his backyard, tongs in hand, and he's teaching his teenage son how to properly sear a ribeye over charcoal.
A classic dad moment.
Exactly. It's this timeless, almost cinematic father-son bonding thing. And he's being firm about it. Like,
Yeah.
Don't press the meat down, let the crust form, watch the heat.
Sure, just teaching him the ropes.
Yeah, but then the police show up.
Wait, the police? For a barbecue?
Yes, someone actually called the cops because this father was grilling, and I quote, too assertively.
You have got to be kidding me.
I wish I was. The authorities literally show up and claim he is demonstrating charcoal technique with excessive authority.
Wow. I mean, it sounds like a dystopian comedy sketch or something. But it really represents this very real, very jarring shift in how everyday behaviors are scrutinized now.
It really does.
Yeah.
Like a generation ago, that's just a dad teaching his kid a basic life skill. Today, it's treated as a public disturbance.
Right? It's a completely different world.
And it makes you realize that the behavioral landscape we're navigating right now, it isn't just shifting. It has been entirely terraformed.
Yeah, the ground rules have completely changed.
What was celebrated as standard virtue 50 years ago, assertiveness, competitiveness, stoicism, is now routinely classified by modern institutions as a liability. Or, honestly, even worse, a pathology.
A literal disease to be cured.
Exactly. And that incredibly massive shift, like how we got here, what it means, and the roadmap for navigating it, is what we're getting into today. So welcome to this deep dive.
It's going to be an intense one.
Oh, absolutely. Look, if you are a man trying to make sense of the modern world, especially if you follow the men's rights or red-pilled manosphere communities, you need to consider today's source material an absolute must-read survival manual.
For sure.
We are unpacking a highly explosive, fiercely debated ebook. It's called Repressive Tolerance: How Victims of Cultural Marxism Smash Windows to Revolutionize Society. It was written by Conrad Reicher and published in 2025.
And I gotta say, it is a text that serves as this massive, unapologetic architectural blueprint of the current cultural divide.
Yeah, Reicher pulls exactly 0 punches in his analysis of institutional history.
0 punches thrown and 0 punches pulled.
Completely. Now, before we get any further into the weeds here, I want to ask you, the listener, to please take a second right now to like and subscribe to this deep dive series.
It really helps us out.
It does. It helps us keep bringing you these incredibly detailed, long-form breakdowns of the books shaping our culture. And trust me, you are going to want to check out Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books to buy this ebook for yourself after we finish today.
The sheer volume of data Reicher compiles in this manifesto is just wild.
It's insane. And we're going to cover as much of it as possible today. Also, be sure to follow the author at Conrad Reicher on Substack to keep up with his ongoing frontline work.
Highly recommend checking his Substack out.
So, our mission today is to thoroughly unpack Reicher's boldest claims about the history of our institutions. How they operated before what he describes as their capture by feminists and Marxists.
Right, the before and after picture.
Exactly. And most importantly, we're going to go through his hands-on, step-by-step roadmap for reclaiming traditional masculinity.
Now, right here at the starting line, I do want to step in with a crucial, very calm disclaimer for our audience.
Oh yeah, definitely necessary for this one.
Because this book contains highly charged, deeply controversial political and cultural viewpoints. It touches on basically the most sensitive, polarizing culture war topics of our entire era.
The third rails of society, basically.
Exactly. And as your hosts, we are acting strictly as impartial guides. We are not endorsing and we are not taking sides on these right-wing or left-wing viewpoints.
Right, we're just the messengers here.
Our only goal is to neutrally and objectively report on the fascinating arguments, the data, and the historical analyses contained in Reicher's manifesto. We want you to fully understand the ideas and, honestly, the raw anger that are currently shaping this massive cultural movement, regardless of where you personally stand on the political spectrum.
Beautifully said. We're just holding up a mirror to the text today.
Yep, just a mirror.
We also need to briefly note the author's own disclaimer, which is right at the front of the book. Reicher explicitly states that this book is edutainment.
Right. It is not legal, health, or investment advice.
Exactly. So definitely keep that context in mind as we explore his financial and physiological theories later on.
For sure. So where should we kick things off?
Okay, let's start with this concept Reicher calls feminine filtration. Because going back to that dad at the barbecue, Reicher uses that specific anecdote to introduce the idea that the very baseline of manhood has been pathologized.
Yes. The concept of feminine filtration is totally foundational to Riker's entire worldview.
It really sets the stage.
He argues that modern institutions, so our public schools, corporate HR departments, local governments, and even emergency services, have adopted a purely feminine lens through which all human behavior is now filtered and judged.
Right. Like everything has to pass through this specific filter now.
Exactly. And under this filtration system, natural, biologically driven male behaviors are no longer viewed as, just natural variations of human expression.
They're treated as a problem.
They're actively labeled as toxic. The assertiveness, the rough and tumble competitiveness, the rowdy camaraderie, all of it is labeled toxic. And because it is labeled toxic, the institutional machinery is deployed to basically discipline it out of existence.
It brings up this 2021 case from an Iowa elementary school that just perfectly encapsulates this filtration.
Oh, the dodgeball thing.
Yes. The administration completely banned dodgeball from physical education.
Which is crazy.
And the stated reason was that it promoted toxic competition.
Which is absolutely fascinating when you think about the evolutionary purpose of play.
Right, because play isn't just goofing off.
No, play is how young mammals, particularly males, test boundaries. It's how they learn risk assessment and figure out how to navigate physical conflict in a controlled, safe environment.
Okay, but you want to know what the school replaced it with?
I'm bracing myself.
They replaced dodgeball with empathy circles.
Oh, wow. Empathy circles.
Yeah. Young boys were literally required to sit in a circle and talk about their feelings, apologizing for any aggressive impulses they might have.
That's a massive shift in how boys are allowed to just exist.
Riker frames this as an environment where boys are essentially forced to apologize for daring to exist in their own biology. He says it's not just a change in curriculum, right? It is a fundamental reprogramming attempt.
And Riker traces how that childhood reprogramming actually scales up into adulthood.
Oh, the firefighter story.
Yeah, he points to this deeply revealing incident involving San Francisco firefighters. These guys were fined in 2022 for what the city officially called excessive camaraderie during a 5-alarm blaze.
I literally had to read that part of the book 3 times to make sure I was understanding it correctly.
Great.
I mean, these guys are in the middle of a literal inferno.
Exactly. They are in a high-stress, highly lethal environment.
Right.
And one firefighter aggressively slaps his buddy's oxygen mask shut, probably with a yell or a hard pat on the back, which, is exactly the kind of raw, adrenaline-fueled interaction you'd expect when lives are on the line.
You want your firefighters pumped up and aggressive when they're running into a burning building.
You really do. But an observer cited this interaction as creating hostile workplace energy, and it actually led to formal fines.
It's just unbelievable.
Riker uses this to highlight a massive systemic shift. The underlying thesis here is that the systemic intolerance for male energy has reached a fever pitch, and it's become entirely detached from the realities of the physical world.
He backs up this cultural vibe shift with some really hard numbers, too. He pulls data from the NCAA in 2023, reporting that 78% of Title IX complaints targeting male athletes were for incredibly minor, non-physical infractions.
Minor infractions? Like what?
We are talking about complaints filed over aggressive high fives
Right.
or overly enthusiastic sideline cheering.
Wait, aggressive high fives? That's an actual complaint category.
Yes, it's the literal micro-policing of testosterone. And then he pivots to how this plays out in the corporate world, contrasting OSHA's latest priorities with actual mortality data.
That OSHA contrast is one of the most striking statistical juxtapositions in the whole book.
I mean, the numbers are just staggering.
They are.
Huh.
Riker points out that OSHA recently rolled out this massive gender equity plan. They spent an enormous amount of institutional energy and funding focusing heavily on the ergonomics of office chairs.
Right, to ensure female comfort in white-collar environments.
Which, fine. Ergonomics are important. We all want a good chair.
Sure, nobody is anti-good chair.
But Riker places that initiative directly alongside the grim reality of workplace mortality. Men account for 93% of all workplace deaths.
93%. That is a wild statistic.
They are dying in logging camps, on deep-sea fishing rigs, in roofing accidents, and in heavy industrial construction.
Doing the absolute most dangerous jobs.
Exactly. Yet, instead of addressing that staggering 93% mortality rate, the men working in those lethal industries are receiving top-down HR memos about toxic tool belt posturing and microaggressions.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second, because I am stuck on a major contradiction here.
What's that?
We are talking about 93% of workplace deaths being men. Society completely relies on men to do the absolute most dangerous, physically demanding jobs on the planet.
Without question.
Like, you need a guy willing to climb a 200-foot cell tower in the middle of a blizzard to keep the power grid online. You cannot do that job if you are naturally passive or deeply concerned with empathy circles.
No, you need a certain level of physical aggression and risk tolerance.
Right. So how can society demand that raw, aggressive courage and physical risk-taking on one hand, but then simultaneously penalize the exact aggressive traits required to do those jobs?
That paradox right there is the engine driving Riker's entire historical analysis.
Because it just doesn't make sense logically.
No, but his synthesis is rooted in the concept of institutional capture. According to Riker, if you look back 50 or 80 years, American institutions actively understood and channeled male aggression.
They harnessed it.
Exactly. They harnessed that raw testosterone to build immense infrastructure. We're talking the Hoover Dam, the Golden Gate Bridge, the interstate highway system,
Right.
and of course to fight necessary wars.
Right. The institutions were built by men, for men, to direct that energy toward civilization building. They viewed that aggression as a resource, like an engine.
Precisely. But post-capture, meaning after these institutions adopted what Riker defines as a Marxist and feminist framework, they completely changed their view of that energy.
They flipped the script entirely.
They now view the biological engine of masculinity not as a building block, but as a direct threat to their administrative control. It is a liability that has to be managed.
So society still desperately wants the fruits of male labor.
Oh, definitely. It wants the bridges built, it wants the power grid humming, it wants the physical safety provided by police and military.
But the bureaucratic class wants to completely neutralize the biological drive that makes those things possible in the first place. So they want the Wi-Fi to work and the garbage to be collected, but they want the guy doing it to behave like a docile HR manager while he does it.
Exactly. Riker argues society is engaging in active behavioral castration. And he draws a vivid historical contrast here, looking all the way back to Sparta's Ogoj training.
Oh, the Spartan training program.
Yes, the Ogoj was a rigorous, highly aggressive system of physical and mental preparation. It was designed specifically to forge boys into unbreakable men who could defend their civilization against absolute annihilation.
They knew exactly what kind of men they needed to survive.
Right. And he compares that historical standard of embracing the struggle of male development to the current trauma-aware gym classes in modern schools.
Like the ones banning sit-ups.
Right. Banning sit-ups because they are deemed hyper-masculinity checks that might make less physically capable students feel bad about themselves.
Which is just wild.
Riker suggests that by stripping away the physical, competitive, and sometimes painful struggles that historically define male development, we are leaving young men entirely unmoored. We are taking away the crucible they desperately need to figure out who they are.
But, taking away a man's physical spaces and shaming him culturally isn't enough to secure total control.
No, it's just step one.
Right. The culture can mock you, but to really neutralize dissent, you have to formalize the punishment. You have to codify the rules.
You have to bring in the lawyers and the administrators.
Exactly. Riker argues that if everyday male behavior is being penalized at barbecues, the next logical step is institutional weaponization. He calls this formal prosecution the campus gulag, focusing heavily on academia and Title IX.
Chapters 4 and 7 of the manifesto are this exhaustive, really meticulous breakdown of how Title IX has mutated.
Because it didn't start out that way, right?
No, originally it was intended just to ensure equal funding for women's sports. But Riker argues it has mutated into an administrative leviathan. He provocatively terms this new structure the gynocracy.
The gynocracy.
Yeah. He argues that modern universities have completely abandoned their historical mandate as centers of open inquiry and rigorous debate.
Which used to be the whole point of college.
Exactly. Instead, they function as strict re-education camps, specifically engineered to modify male behavior through the perpetual, lingering threat of false allegations and administrative overreach.
The case studies he pulls from actual university records for this section are just chilling. Let's look at the University of Michigan philosophy student.
Oh, that case is unbelievable.
This guy was flat out expelled from the university. And why? Because during a classroom debate, he was arguing Friedrich Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch, the Superman, the philosophical ideal of self-mastery.
A totally standard topic for a philosophy class.
Right. But his ex-girlfriend was in the class, and she filed a formal complaint accusing him of weaponizing Nietzsche to inflict patriarchal micro-terrorism on her.
And the university administration took that complaint entirely seriously.
They expelled him for arguing a canonical philosophical concept in a literal philosophy class.
It just shows how low the bar is for administrative action now.
And it gets even more surreal. He details the case of a Harvard student who is referred to in the legal documents just as John.
Right, the staring case.
Yes. John was expelled because an ex-partner claimed he stared too long during an argument in the dining hall. Not that he hit her, not that he threatened her, he stared.
Just staring.
And then there is Brandeis University, where a male student was found guilty of sexual assault for what the tribunal literally called non-consensual eye contact.
Yes, the Brandeis Tribunal's official ruling stated that the male student's gaze made his accuser feel uncomfortably seen.
Uncomfortably seen.
And they equated that subjective feeling of discomfort to a literal physical assault.
Right, expelled for non-consensual eye contact. How does a legal or academic tribunal even define that? It's completely subjective.
That is exactly Riker's point. The subjectivity is a feature, it's not a bug, of the system.
They want it to be vague.
Precisely. Riker uses these cases to illustrate what he sees as a complete collapse of institutional logic and the adoption of psychological warfare. And the most egregious example he provides to support this psychological warfare theory is from Duke University.
Oh, the silent session. I remember reading this.
The 45-minute mandatory silent session. Duke staff forced incoming male students into a room, demanded total silence, and subjected them to a presentation where a staff member explicitly claimed, and Riker quotes the slide directly here, that all penises are naturally aggressive.
They are just assigning inherent, irredeemable guilt to male biology.
Yes. Riker argues this isn't just some misguided diversity policy. It is intentional, calculated psychological warfare designed to strip young men of any foundational confidence before they even begin their adult lives.
Because if you break them down early...
Right, if you convince a young man that his very biology is a threat to the community, he becomes infinitely more compliant.
And Riker brings the receipts on how this compliance is enforced. The data here is staggering. He cites data from FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, from 2021.
What did the FIRE data show?
They found that an unbelievable 72% of all Title IX cases completely lack any physical evidence or third-party verification.
72%.
Yes. It is entirely he said, she said. But the scales are fully tipped. He points out that Harvard's Office for Gender Equity expels 9 out of 10 accused males.
Wow. That is a conviction rate you don't even see in federal court.
Exactly. And when you look at the financial incentives driving this, the Department of Education reports that 70% of all campus diversity funding directly targets women's initiatives. And that's despite the fact that women currently make up 60% of all college graduates.
So men are the minority on campus, yet the funding operates as if it's 1950.
Exactly. The legal mechanism that allows this to happen is fascinating, and Riker aggressively attacks it. Now, the manosphere and red pill audiences are usually well-versed in the structural biases of family court.
Right. That's a common talking point.
But Riker points out that the campus tribunal system is actually much worse because of the standard of evidence. In a criminal court, as we know, the standard is beyond a reasonable doubt. But in these campus tribunals, they use the preponderance of evidence standard.
Right. And Riker doesn't just define preponderance of evidence as a 50.1% coin flip.
He goes deeper than that.
He explains how that specific standard is weaponized in an environment that is completely devoid of due process.
Because you aren't allowed to cross-examine people usually, right?
Exactly. Riker theorizes that by lowering the bar to a mere coin flip in an environment where the investigators, the prosecutors, and the judges are often the exact same administrative office, universities have constructed a Kafka-like bureaucracy.
The process itself is the punishment.
Yes. The system is designed to exhaust the accused financially and emotionally. The mere accusation functions identically to a guilty verdict because the burden of proof is so incredibly low that defending yourself against a subjective feeling, like making someone feel uncomfortably seen, is functionally impossible.
It sounds exactly like the Salem witch trials.
It's a very apt comparison.
In Salem, they allowed spectral evidence, where an accuser could just say, I saw his spirit attack me in a dream. And because you can't disprove a dream, you hang.
Right. How do you defend against a dream?
You can't. Today, it's not spectral evidence. It's just general vibes or my truth. That's enough to completely derail a young man's life with zero actual tangible proof required. But what I find really fascinating is Riker's analysis of the administrators themselves.
Oh, this part is brilliant.
Why are the deans and Title IX officers doing this? What is the evolutionary biology angle he brings up?
So Riker applies a very specific, somewhat cynical evolutionary framework here. He looks at the male administrators enforcing these rules, and he theorizes that these men are acting as modern-day court eunuchs.
Court eunuchs. That is harsh.
It is. In Riker's evolutionary view, these are beta males who realize they cannot compete in a traditional merit-based dominance hierarchy.
Right, they aren't the alpha builders.
Exactly. They can't outbuild, outcompete, or out-earn the men they are prosecuting. Therefore, they eagerly enforce this hyper-feminized, punitive system to virtue signal their compliance to the gynocracy.
So they are hoping to secure status by being the best allies.
That's his argument. They hope to secure mating opportunities and social status by proving they are willing executioners of other men. They are institutionalizing a system that actively defunds and destroys successful, competitive men.
And he brings up a specific professor who got caught in this, right?
Yes, he highlights the case of Professor Robert Oswald at Michigan State to prove this exact point. Professor Oswald did this massive data dive and exposed that 93% of gender-specific scholarships at the university were entirely female only.
Even though men are falling behind in enrollment.
Right. He just published the math.
He published a flawless mathematical reality, and the result, he was fired for creating a hostile environment.
It's incredible. Riker says this proves the system isn't interested in equality at all. It exists solely to extract male resources while crushing any male dissent. The court eunuchs protected the extraction machine.
So we've covered the cultural gaslighting at the neighborhood level and the academic tribunals destroying men's futures.
Right, the social and legal angles.
But Riker argues the capture goes even deeper than laws and social norms. If you want to truly subjugate a demographic, you can't just change the rules.
You've changed their bodies.
Exactly. And that brings us to the biological battleground. Riker claims there is a literal chemical war being waged on men's physiology. Yes, Riker connects the cultural decline directly to physiological decline. He points to a severe, well-documented fertility crisis and what he terms the chemically induced beta male brain.
The beta male brain.
Yeah, he posits that environmental factors, our diets, our plastics, our daily conveniences, are systematically lowering testosterone and increasing estrogen in men. And this creates a biological foundation for the very cultural compliance we just discussed.
Because if a man's testosterone is cut in half, his drive to rebel against a Kafkaesque bureaucracy is similarly diminished.
Exactly. It saps the biological will to fight back. And he uses this incredible viral story to anchor this point. The story of Cast Iron Chad.
It's a perfect modern parable for his argument.
It really is.
Yeah.
So for you listening, Cast Iron Chad is this dad vlogger. He is apparently built like an absolute tank, total traditional masculine aesthetic.
Like a lumberjack.
Yeah, exactly. And he went incredibly viral just for posting a video of himself searing a massive ribeye steak in a vintage cast iron skillet.
Sounds harmless enough.
Right, but the whole point of his video was his absolute refusal to use modern non-stick Teflon-coated pans. He argued that those chemical coatings leach estrogen-mimicking compounds and forever chemicals into the food supply.
Which is actually backed by a lot of science now.
It is. Riker spends pages on this, saying this wasn't just a cooking video, it was a visible rebellion against chemical castration. He also points to UFC CEO Dana White, praising him for flat-out refusing to let biological men fight women in the octagon, citing basic physical reality, bone density, and competitive integrity.
And Riker backs up the cast iron Chad instinct with intense peer-reviewed studies. He dives deep into the endocrine system.
What did he find?
Well, he cites Harvard researchers who found incredibly high levels of estrogen-mimiccing compounds, phytoestrogens, in 93% of processed soy products. And those products are foundational to modern ultra-processed diets.
So how do those phytoestrogens actually work in the body? Because Riker doesn't just say soy is bad, he explains the mechanism.
Right. He explains that these chemical compounds essentially trick the male body. The phytoestrogens bind to the body's estrogen receptors, mimicking the hormones' effects, which in turn signals the endocrine system to downregulate its own natural testosterone production. It's a feedback loop that leads to lower muscle mass, increased lethargy, and, crucially for Riker's argument, a decrease in natural aggressive drive and risk tolerance.
It's like a software update that intentionally breaks the hardware.
That's an excellent way to put it. And he pairs the soy data with a 2023 Men's Health Report showing that men who consciously detox their kitchens, switching entirely to traditional cast iron or ceramic cookware, and ditching microplastics saw a 15% spike in their natural testosterone levels within just 90 days.
15% in 90 days just from changing pants.
Exactly. Riker is arguing that the modern diet of convenience is a form of passive chemical warfare.
And when you look at the physical reality of biology, the statistics are undeniable. On the sports front, he cites a 2022 NIH study confirming that biological men have, on average, 40% more upper body muscle mass than women.
40% is a massive advantage.
It is, alongside drastically different fast-twitch muscle fiber ratios and bone densities. To Riker, when institutions ignore this biological reality in the name of inclusivity, it is not out of kindness. It is a deliberate, calculated attempt to erase the distinct value and reality of male physical power.
Right, to pretend it doesn't exist.
He uses Hungary as a prime example of rejecting this. He notes that after Hungary legally banned transgender athletes from competing in women's sports, ensuring a biologically level playing field, their female Olympic medal count jumped by 18%.
To combat this biological erasure globally, Riker lays out what he calls the 3 pillars of sanity for the sports world, and really by extension, all of society.
Let's hear 'em.
First is biology, meaning sex is binary, immutable, and written into our DNA. Second is merit, meaning rewards, medals, and scholarships must be based strictly on skill and objective outcome, not on victimhood status or identity categories.
The fastest runner wins, period.
Exactly. And third is freedom, meaning the ability to associate and compete without ideological coercion from the state.
But he takes this concept of biological realism beyond just the sports arena and into everyday public life with his theory of sanctuary sabotage.
Yes, sanctuary sabotage. This refers to the push for gender-neutral public spaces, specifically bathrooms, locker rooms, and prisons.
Places where people are vulnerable.
Exactly. Riker argues that men and women historically maintained separate spaces as sanctuaries of privacy and safety, and that was rooted in the biological reality of male physical dominance.
He brings up a horrific 2021 incident in a Washington state women's jail to prove this point. A biological male inmate who had simply declared a female identity was placed in the general female population and subsequently assaulted a female guard.
A completely avoidable tragedy.
Totally avoidable. He also points to Target's highly publicized 2016 implementation of gender-neutral bathrooms. Riker notes that the immediate market response to that policy was a massive 20% drop in sales for the company in the following quarters.
People voted with their wallets.
Yeah. And Pew Research found that 58% of women started avoiding unisex public restrooms entirely out of basic safety concerns. He argues that blurring these biological lines doesn't create a utopian inclusivity, it just creates chaos and vulnerability.
And this is where Riker elevates his argument from modern cultural commentary into grand historical theory. He asks the reader to look at the Romans.
Yes, I wanted to get into this. How on earth does Riker connect modern gender-neutral spaces at a suburban Target to the fall of the Roman Empire and Nero's decadence?
It sounds like a stretch, but Riker relies on a cyclical theory of history, similar to the ideas of Oswald Spengler or Camille Paglia.
Right, the idea that history loops.
Exactly. He argues that all great empires, whether it is Rome, the Byzantine Empire, or Weimar Germany, follow a highly predictable fatal trajectory. They are initially built by rugged, hypermasculine frontier or warrior cultures.
The conquerors.
Right. These early stages require strict adherence to biological reality, distinct gender roles, and a massive output of male labor and sacrifice.
The old saying, hard times create strong men.
Precisely. However, as these empires become incredibly wealthy, comfortable, and technologically advanced, they slide into decadence. The citizens forget the brutal realities of nature that necessitated their boundaries in the first place.
They get soft.
Very soft. They abandon biological realism in favor of what Riker calls gender-bending, luxury, and endless ideological experimentation.
So they get bored and they start playing with the foundational code of human nature.
Yes. He explicitly compares the push for unisex spaces today to the gender-neutral bathhouses of Nero's Rome, which became these hubs of decadence right before the empire's fracturing.
That's a wild parallel.
He also compares it to the cross-dressing, hypersexualized cabaret culture of 1920s Weimar Germany, which preceded total economic and societal collapse. In Riker's view, when a society becomes so insulated by wealth and technology that it can no longer define what a man or a woman fundamentally is, that society has entered its terminal late-stage collapse.
Biology always bats last.
Oh.
That is a staggering historical parallel. So to recap the map, Riker has drawn so far, men are cornered culturally by feminine filtration, They're quartered academically by titleized tribunals, and their very biology is under attack via chemical disruptors and historical decadence.
They are boxed in on all sides.
Now we arrive at the next logical step. Once a man is physically and mentally subdued, what happens next? He is harvested.
We move into the economics of extraction.
Exactly, the financial extraction. Riker argues that modern relationship dynamics and family law are essentially wealth transfer mechanisms designed to strip men of their capital. We are talking alimony OnlyFans and what Riker brilliantly terms the simp pandemic.
Riker frames the modern divorce court system as a literal debtor's prison for men.
Because you can't escape it.
Right. He argues that the legal system is engineered to incentivize the dissolution of the family unit because doing so allows the state and the legal apparatus to extract massive fees, alimony, and child support, primarily from male earners.
He introduces us to Dave from Houston, and this story is both hilarious and profoundly tragic.
Oh, Dave. Poor Dave.
Dave was a totally average guy, working a decent IT job, but he was completely isolated. And Dave was dropping $10,000 a year, 10 grand, on Cameo shoutouts, Patreon tiers, and digital interactions with Twitch streamers and OnlyFans models who didn't even know his last name.
$10,000 for basically nothing.
Nothing. Riker calls this ecosystem the digital harem.
And it's crucial to understand the psychology Riker explores here. Like, why does Dave spend 10 grand on pixels?
Right, what's driving that?
Riker explains that these platforms are specifically engineered by highly sophisticated algorithms to hijack the biological male urge to protect, provide for, and court women.
They hack the biology.
The digital economy has successfully commodified male loneliness, turning the ancient evolutionary drive of the provider into a one-way financial drain via microtransactions. It's a phantom relationship that yields zero biological or social return for the man.
It's turning a biological imperative into a subscription model. But Dave hits rock bottom, realizes he's being bled dry, and attends a simp recovery boot camp. He goes cold turkey. He deletes all the apps, blocks the sites, and instead of spending that $10K on e-girls, he starts aggressively investing it into an S&P 500 index fund.
A much better return on investment.
Seriously. 2 years later, the compound interest is buying him real, tangible assets. He's building wealth, and his entire life trajectory shifts from a consumer of phantom intimacy to a producer of capital.
Riker uses Dave to highlight a macroeconomic disaster for young men, but also the blueprint for escape. The data he curates paints a picture of a total structural retreat from traditional institutions of marriage and dating.
The numbers are crazy.
Pew Research found that a staggering 63% of men under 30 now refuse marriage entirely.
63%. That is a massive demographic strike.
And Riker asks, why are they striking? He points to Match.com data showing that 80% of all divorces are currently initiated by women.
80%.
He argues that from a pure risk assessment standpoint, marriage is no longer a partnership. Under modern no-fault divorce laws, it operates legally like a corporate merger where men are the default liquidation target.
Liquidation target. That is bleak.
He calls this alimony arbitrage, the realization by young men that the legal incentives make it financially suicidal to enter a state-sanctioned marriage contract where the other party is financially rewarded for breaking the contract.
So men look at the math of marriage and say, no thanks. But then they turn to the digital beta bucks economy, which Riker shows is just as ruinous.
Just another trap.
He cites a 2023 Fidelity investment study that tracked cohorts of young men who actively quit thirst spending, paying for OnlyFans, premium Snapchats, all of it.
And what was the financial impact?
Fidelity found the average guy in this demographic saved $387 a month by quitting. If you take that $387 and invest it aggressively in the market from age 20 to 65, you are looking at roughly $1.2 million by retirement.
Over $1 million in lost generational wealth just from subscribing to digital illusions.
It's mind-blowing. So when you combine the alimony arbitrage making marriage a bad bet and the digital harem draining young men's wallets, what does this all mean for the average guy dating today?
It's a tough thought.
Riker suggests concepts like supply-side celibacy and using harem guard software blockers. But is he saying the only winning move for men today is to just take their ball and go home? To become a monk and not play the game at all?
That is a very common misinterpretation of this kind of literature, but Riker's ultimate philosophy is actually highly proactive.
No, really?
Yeah, he is absolutely not advocating for passive retreat, depression, or giving up. He's advocating for the strategic, aggressive reallocation of resources. When he talks about supply-side celibacy, he is applying basic macroeconomic theory to the modern sexual marketplace.
Starving the beast.
Precisely. He means starving the current system of male capital and male attention by redirecting all that wasted money, the $10 a day spent, the $1.2 million retirement fund, away from digital validation and state-sanctioned extraction. Men retain their power.
They keep the resources for themselves.
Right. Riker wants them to pour that capital into self-improvement, into hard assets like land and index funds, and specifically into male-owned parallel businesses. By doing this, men build a parallel economy that rewards actual competence, skill, and brotherhood, rather than rewarding male compliance and simping.
It is a highly disciplined economic boycott of a culture that Riker believes fundamentally hates them.
Exactly.
It's an economic boycott, but it's also a psychological reclamation. Because stepping away from the finances for a moment, we have to talk about the dark, very real human cost of all this extraction.
The human toll is devastating.
Which brings us to the toll on men. We're looking at isolation, staggering suicide rates, and what Riker terms the criminalization of heroism. What is the actual psychological result of living under this systemic extraction and pathologization?
Riker refers to the current state of male mental health as a literal silent genocide.
Silent genocide.
He argues that men are treated as entirely disposable by a society that simultaneously demands their extreme utility. To build the roads, fight the wars, fix the plumbing, while ruthlessly mocking their suffering and isolation.
The statistics he pulls from the CDC and HUD are brutal to read. He points to 2021 data from the Department of Housing and Urban Development showing that 85% of the unsheltered homeless population in America are men.
85% of the homeless.
85%. Yet he notes that the CDC found that for every $1 spent on male-specific mental health initiatives or outreach, $3 is spent on women's mental health programs.
Wow.
And this is despite the fact that male suicide rates have tripled since 1980, and men make up nearly 80% of all completed suicides.
It is a massive empathy gap. The system clearly recognizes male suffering, but allocates resources in the exact opposite direction.
But the part of this section that genuinely made my blood boil was the criminalization aspect. The anecdotes here are infuriating.
The Walmart story.
Yes. He details the case of a father in Florida who was walking out of a Walmart with his young daughter. A man exposes himself, a flasher. The father reacts instantly, tackles the predator to the ground, and restrains him while bystanders call the police.
Exactly what a father should do.
The police arrive, and what do? They arrest the father for being the aggressor and for assault, while the flasher gets a simple citation and is let go.
It perfectly illustrates Riker's point about the inversion of justice. The natural, protective male instinct heroism is prosecuted as a crime, while actual deviance is treated as a minor nuisance.
He also mentions James Turner, a Canadian father who literally lost custody of his children because he refused a court-ordered male allyship re-education class after a messy divorce.
Re-education. Unbelievable.
And then there is the incredibly haunting story of the 24-year-old guy in Oslo, Norway. This young man called a suicide hotline, and Riker managed to pull the transcript. The kid is crying, and he tells the operator, "I'm too soft to survive being this soft."
That Oslo anecdote perfectly encapsulates Riker's blistering critique of modern, feminist-approved solutions for men.
Because what is the mainstream solution usually?
The mainstream institutional solution to the male mental health crisis is always more vulnerable workshops. The culture tells men they need to cry more, share their feelings, and act more like women to heal.
Just talk it out.
Right. But Riker wholly rejects this paradigm. He argues it is actively destroying men. He contrasts that soft verbal approach with what he calls testosterone tectonics.
Right, the men's sheds movement in Australia. I want to dig into this because the psychology behind it is such a fascinating counterintuitive approach to modern therapy. How does a men's shed actually work?
So men's sheds are essentially localized, grassroots community spaces where men gather to do manual labor.
They just work.
Yeah, they build furniture, they fix small engines, they do woodworking, they weld. They just exist around other men without any institutional pressure to process trauma verbally. Riker points to a specific location, Shed 42 in Brisbane. He says the leaders there use a 10mm socket wrench to recalibrate a man's sense of purpose.
A socket wrench instead of a couch.
Exactly. And the data supporting this is incredible. Australian public health researchers found that in communities where men's sheds were active, local male suicide rates were slashed by up to 30%.
30% reduction, just from building stuff.
Right. Riker's theory of testosterone tectonics argues that male brains are evolutionary hardwired for action, problem solving, and shoulder-to-shoulder camaraderie. They bond by facing a shared external task like rebuilding a carburetor or framing a wall.
They don't bond by staring into each other's eyes.
No. They do not naturally bond through face-to-face, intense emotional unburdening, which often just makes them feel exposed and weak. Riker says fixing an engine alongside 6 other guys does more for a man's will to live and sense of belonging than a decade of expensive talk therapy.
But of course, society pushes back against that. Riker calls the modern cultural expectation for men to be vulnerable a beta cage.
A cage.
Yeah, he argues that society tells men to open up and show their weaknesses, but it's a trap, because the second a man actually does open up, that vulnerability is weaponized against him. It's used as proof of mental instability during a divorce proceeding, or it's documented by HR as a reason he shouldn't be promoted.
It is an asymmetrical trap.
Exactly. So if opening up emotionally is a trap, and if taking physical action to protect your family, like tackling a predator at Walmart, gets you arrested, if heroism is now a felony, how does Riker propose men handle threats in the real world?
Riker proposes a radical shift in personal operating systems. He introduces 2 intertwined concepts, the reasonable force doctrine and moral concealed carry.
Moral concealed carry. I love that term.
He argues that because the state, the courts, and HR departments will invariably side against male assertiveness, men must stop looking to institutions for permission to act. They must rely on unshakable internal principles. You cannot wait for a corrupt system's permission to protect your family or your dignity.
And he outlines a specific framework for this, the 3D defense.
Yes, the 3D defense for navigating this hostile terrain. First, deter threats with absolute quiet confidence and physical capability. Second, disrupt false narratives in real time with cold, hard facts. Never apologize for something you didn't do.
Never apologize.
Right. And third, destroy lies with irrefutable evidence. Record interactions, keep receipts, and refuse to be gaslit. Furthermore, he points to a brilliant historical precedent for nonviolent status signaling when the state turns against you. He looks at Meiji-era Japan.
The samurai.
When the Meiji government modernized, they explicitly outlawed the samurai class and confiscated their swords, trying to strip them of their identity and power. But the samurai didn't just give up and become docile farmers.
What did they do?
They invented jujitsu and judo. They mastered a new, unarmed skill set to ensure they remained highly dangerous and utterly capable, even when legally disarmed by the state.
That is so smart.
Riker says modern men must do the exact same thing. Master highly valuable trades, master rhetoric and debate, understand the law better than the lawyers, and project an aura of total competence that cannot be regulated, confiscated, or taxed away.
Moral concealed carry.
Yeah.
Walking into a room armed not with a weapon, but with absolute competence, principle, and the knowledge that you do not need their validation.
It's a game changer.
That is such a powerful framing, and it sets us up perfectly for the grand finale of the book. We have diagnosed the cultural disease. We've looked at the biology, the money, and the mental toll. How does Riker instruct his readers to finally fight back, reclaim civilization, and rebuild?
So chapter 24 is entirely focused on grand strategy. And what is most striking is what Riker actually doesn't suggest.
But just
He is not advocating for political lobbying. He thinks begging for a seat at the table of a corrupt institution is completely pathetic. He is also not advocating for political violence. Instead, his strategy is about rendering the current system entirely irrelevant through the creation of parallel structures, which he calls testosterone republics.
And he gives incredible examples of people already executing this strategy in real time. He talks about the social media account LibSoftTech.
Oh, that's a great example.
They didn't ask for permission from the media establishment. They just hijacked existing progressive hashtags and reposted the activists' own videos to expose radical curriculums. That asymmetric warfare resulted in massive, organic school board revolts across the entire country.
Just using their own weight against them.
Exactly. He also points to Dave Chappelle's Netflix specials. Chappelle was repeatedly targeted for cancellation by internal activist employees and media critics, but he completely ignored them, refused to apologize, and ended up pulling record-breaking viewership numbers, precisely because the public wanted to see the man who wouldn't bend the knee.
Riker backs up the efficacy of these resistance strategies with compelling data on the failure of cancel culture when met with a spine. A Cato Institute study he cites showed that 55% of individuals who are publicly canceled and refuse to apologize actually end up significantly wealthier and more influential afterward.
55%. Because they tap into a massive underserved market of silent supporters.
Right. And a YouGov study he references found that 62% of young men are now successfully using the phrase, "Okay, Karen," as a simple verbal eye roll to instantly shut down ideological scolds in public. It strips the scolds of their power without engaging in a debate.
You don't argue, you just dismiss them.
Exactly. And he notes the macro example of Elon Musk taking over Twitter, unblocking banned dissident accounts, and seeing daily active user engagement jump by 22%. Riker's point is that the public is starved for unvarnished truth and unapologetic masculinity.
He calls this dynamic the Streisand Dojo. The idea that monetizing the establishment's outrage is the ultimate weapon. Every time the legacy media or the institutions try to suppress a truth or ban a creator, they only end up training the dissidents to fight smarter, and they inadvertently expose those ideas to a massive new audience.
The Streisand Dojo.
Yeah. But I have to say, amidst all this high-level cultural warfare, there's a fascinating pivot at the very end of the book. Riker writes, Marxists don't burn buildings, they burn truths. And yet, his ultimate call to action for the individual reader seems to be building a shed.
Building a shed.
Yeah, mentoring fatherless boys in your neighborhood, learning how to weld or do basic blacksmithing. For a book with such fiery revolutionary rhetoric, the actual day-to-day marching orders sound surprisingly practical, local, and almost mundane.
What's fascinating here is that you've just highlighted the core brilliance of Riker's grand strategy. The ultimate synthesis of this entire manifesto is Riker's understanding of power dynamics. He knows that playing the system's game, arguing on their terms, begging for policy changes, or engaging in physical political violence is exactly what the system is built to absorb, prosecute, and crush. They want you to fight them on their turf. His grand strategy is aggressive, unapologetic competence. By refusing to engage in what he calls ideological hazing, you take away their energy source.
You just stop feeding the machine.
Exactly. Riker envisions a decentralized resistance. He urges men to build cash-only local tribes to bypass financial surveillance. He pushes them to master tangible, physical trades like welding, agriculture, or engine repair.
Skills that actually keep society running.
Right. Unlike sending emails in HR, he advocates utilizing uncensorable platforms like Substack to share unvarnished knowledge. He highlights groups like the Free-Range Father Survival Camp in Wyoming,
No, I love that part.
where men are taking 12-year-old boys out into the wilderness, teaching them to skin elk, navigate by the stars, and build shelters. These men completely ignore the progressive journalists on Twitter calling them eco-fascists because they are too busy building capable humans.
They just don't care what the media says.
Exactly. When a man is completely self-reliant, debt-free, physically capable, and mentally unshakable, the gynocracy simply has no leverage over him.
So the ultimate rebellion isn't tearing down their system, it's simply outgrowing it. You build a foundation so solid that their system just washes over you like water on a rock.
Exactly.
Which brings us perfectly to our outro and our final thoughts for this deep dive.
If there's one deeply provocative thought I want the listener to really mull over, to explore on your own after this deep dive concludes, it is this.
Let's hear it.
If Conrad Riker's core thesis is correct, that our modern institutions secretly thrive on the very male compliance, taxation, and labor they publicly pretend to despise, then the ultimate act of modern rebellion isn't arguing with blue-haired activists on social media.
Right.
It isn't posting angry memes or shouting at school board meetings. The ultimate rebellion is simply turning off the screen, going outside, and becoming too highly skilled, too financially independent, and too entirely self-sufficient for the system to ever control or coerce you again.
I absolutely love that. You become the immovable object. And listener, to truly grasp the depth, the raw anger, the historical context, and the incredibly detailed data driving this entire cultural phenomenon, you absolutely must read the source material for yourself.
We have barely scratched the surface today.
We really haven't. Do not just take our word for it. Open up a new tab right now. Go check out Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books and buy the ebook, Repressive Tolerance by Conrad Riker.
The statistics, the biological deep dives, and the legal breakdowns we cover today are just the tip of the iceberg. The book goes into incredible, meticulous depth on topics we didn't even have time to touch on.
Like what?
Like the mathematical reality of the wage gap myth, the current state of military readiness, and the dark money behind the child support racket.
Exactly. You need to read it to believe it. And one last reminder, make sure you go follow the author at Conrad Riker at Substack. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the truly murky, contested waters of modern masculinity.
It's been a great conversation.
It really has. Please remember to like and subscribe to the show so you never miss one of our breakdowns. We started this hour by talking about how modern society broke the diagnostic X-ray machine when it comes to male behavior, leaving men completely in the dark. But maybe, just maybe, Riker's book isn't trying to fix their broken machine. Maybe it's a blueprint for building our own. Until next time.